sing. Oh, when the Spirit says sing, you gotta sing right along. You gotta sing when the Spirit says sing. You gotta jump when the Spirit says jump. You gotta jump when the Spirit says jump. Oh, when the Spirit says jump, you gotta jump right along. You gotta jump when the Spirit says jump. You gotta walk up to sheep shearing when the Spirit says walk up to sheep shearing. You gotta go to sheep shearing when the Spirit says go to sheep shearing. When the Spirit says walk up to sheep shearing, you gotta walk right along. You gotta walk when the Spirit says walk. You gotta laugh when the Spirit says laugh. You gotta laugh when the Spirit says laugh. But when the Spirit says laugh, you gotta laugh right along. You gotta laugh when the Spirit says laugh. You gotta swim when the Spirit says swim. You gotta swim when the Spirit says swim. When the Spirit says swim, you gotta swim right along. You gotta swim when the Spirit says swim. You gotta hush when the Spirit says hush. You gotta hush when the Spirit says hush. When the Spirit says hush, you gotta hush right along. You gotta hush when the Spirit says hush. You gotta shout when the Spirit says shout. You gotta shout when the Spirit says shout. But when the Spirit says shout, you gotta shout right along. You gotta shout when the Spirit says shout. You gotta smile when the Spirit says smile. You gotta smile when the Spirit says smile. But when the Spirit says smile, you gotta smile right along. You gotta smile when the Spirit says smile. You gotta stop when the Spirit says stop. You gotta stop when the Spirit says stop. But when the Spirit says stop, you gotta stop right along. You gotta stop when the Spirit says stop.
All right.